As we have been talking about, Steve Bannon is expected to turn himself in today. He was indicted Friday on federal charges related to the investigation into the January 6th attack on the Capitol. The longtime ally of former President Trump could be in court this afternoon, and he's facing charges of contempt of Congress after failing to appear for a deposition before the House Select Committee last month. He also refused to provide documents in response to the panel subpoena. So let's bring in Nikole Killion, who has been following this story for us from Capitol Hill. Nikole, who is representing Bannon, and what can we expect from his court appearance later on today?
Well, it appears Steve Bannon may have a new attorney, David Schoen, who actually represented the former president during the impeachment trial earlier this year. And so we don't necessarily have all those details as to why there may have been a switch or in addition to his legal team. We're still working to clarify this. But again, this all comes ahead of an expected court appearance later today. At this point, we don't know yet if Steve Bannon has turned himself in. However, CBS News has learned through law enforcement sources that he is expected to self-surrender at some point today ahead of this court appearance this afternoon where he's due to be arraigned.
So, Nikole, what are you hearing from your sources there in D.C. on the likelihood that Steve Bannon could possibly be convicted? And if he is convicted, what sort of punishment could he face? I mean, I've seen some people positing that there's going to be an appeal, then that will be rejected. There'll be another appeal that'll be rejected. And by that point, we'll be into 2022. Republicans will control the House and nothing will happen.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think it's too soon to tell. Obviously, the case has to get to trial first before we even know what that potential, if he will potentially be convicted or not. What we do know is that if he is convicted, he faces a fine of up to $1,000 and a year in jail for each count. And remember, he has been indicted on 2 counts of contempt of Congress, one for failing to appear for a deposition, the other for failing to produce documents. But look, we know, as far as the former president is concerned, that he has made clear that he will engage in a very exhaustive legal process, that he is going to see this process through. And I could imagine that that may not be any different for some of his allies. This really is kind of like a test case, if you will, because this is really the first major former Trump official who has been held in contempt of Congress as a result of this Select Committee probe. Obviously, you know, there's other folks out there like Mark Meadows, the former White House chief of staff, who didn't appear for a deposition last week, and you've got the committee potentially threatening criminal contempt charges against him as well. So really, this is kind of a test case to see how this could potentially impact other witnesses. And certainly from the committee's standpoint, they hope that it does send a clear signal to these other witnesses that they're trying to hear from in order to win their compliance.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification on that, Nikole. That was sort of the what I was sort of getting at. There have been some who've suggested, as I did, that that there will be a whole repeal process, and potentially, I should say potentially, Republicans could control the House after the midterm elections. They could go the other way, where he actually does face some jail time, and that sends a message to anybody else that this committee would be sending subpoenas to. Sorry, Anne-Marie.
No, it's okay. There are some as well who have said that the Justice Department have been politicized, if you will. It used to be the Democrats claiming that, but now it's the other way around. Republicans say that the Select Committee is weaponizing the Justice Department with these subpoenas. They are also warning that they will go after Biden aides if they take back the House in next year's midterms, as Vlad was talking about. So much for the politicization of the Justice Department. But can you sort of explain what that means? It's a little bit of finger pointing back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely, which is not unusual here on Capitol Hill, but certainly things have kind of reached a new level, especially post-January 6th. But look, there are some Republicans who do feel that, you know, this whole committee and this whole process has been politicized. It's precisely the reason why there are only 2 Republicans sitting on the Select Committee right now. You'll recall that there were some Republicans who were named to the panel and actually had to get kicked off the panel, if you will, and that kind of struck a whole dispute between congressional leaders as far as even standing this committee up. So, it kind of unfortunately has been a politicized process from the start. And so you do have a number of Republicans who feel like, well, hey, if you're going to go after the former Trump administration, well, watch out, because if we take control, we may go after the Biden administration on things, whether it's, that Durham report, whether it is, the situation in Afghanistan or the border. There are various gripes to go around as far as many Republicans are concerned. But at the end of the day, the Select Committee is trying to do its job in the best way possible. They're trying to take the politics out of it, even if they don't have a fully balanced committee, to really try to get to the bottom of what happened on the 6th.
So let's talk about former President Trump's former chief of staff, that's Mark Meadows. He reportedly sent a detailed memo to former Vice President Mike Pence last year. In that memo, it reportedly contained a multi-step plan to overturn the 2020 election result. What are you learning about this memo?
Yeah, so all of this is stemming from a forthcoming book from a colleague from another network, Jonathan Karl, who covered the White House pretty extensively. And so, certainly this could be something of interest to the Select Committee. I mean, we know that they want to talk to Mark Meadows for a number of reasons, because they do believe that he was with the former president on January 6th. And quite interesting to note that, last week after he didn't show up for that deposition, Chairman Benny Thompson issued a pretty sternly worded letter saying that, Mark Meadows really hasn't turned over anything, including text messages from that day. So we do know that the committee really wants to know more about these conversations that Mark Meadows may have been having with the former president, not only in the run-up to January 6th, but actually on that day. So again, we'll have to see if Meadows ultimately decides to comply. So far, that is not the path that he has taken. And so Chairman Thompson has been very clear that he may move forward with those contempt charges against Meadows as early as this week, although so far the committee hasn't scheduled any official proceedings.
Wow. Nikole, thank you very much.